Hi everyone, and welcome to the next review video for the Biology or Living Environments regions. This is Unit 2, Topic 4, Part 2, looking over some more human body systems. So the first two body systems we're looking at in this video are the nervous and endocrine systems. And the reason these are grouped together in this way is because they have the same goal and that they work together for control and coordination of the body. So all the words that are coming out of my mouth right now are controlled by the nervous system or my brain, which is telling me the words to say, and hormonal responses in my body are triggered by the endocrine system for longer term regulation. And these both work together with the goal of maintaining homeostasis. So, if you remember from earlier, homeostasis is the ability of an organism to regulate and maintain a stable internal environment, which is necessary for the survival of any organism. So, now we'll look at the two systems specifically. So, first, we have the nervous system, and the nervous system communicates through electrochemical messages. So, these electrochemical messages are called electrochemical because the messages are sent both through electric signals, which we'll talk about in a second, and also chemical signals through neurotransmitters. So the first part of that are electric signals, which are along nerve cells or neurons. So nerve cells or neurons, which you will need to know the shape of, which are further down on the page, are these very, very long, irregularly shaped cells, very long shells with sort of protruding ends called dendrites or axons, where electrochemical signals are transported. And then the next thing you want to know are the neurotransmitters, which are the chemical part of electrochemical messages. So these neurotransmitters are proteins, and because they are proteins, they must have a specific shape. If you remember from earlier when we discussed proteins, the structure or shape determines function. So their shape is very important. That's because they bind to specific receptors that are on other neurons or nerve cells, which means that their shape needs to be very specific so that they can bind to the correct receptors. And then the final thing about the nervous system is that it is a stimulus response reaction. So a stimulus is sent, and that stimulus is conveyed through these electrochemical messages, which we just discussed, and those messages then trigger a response somewhere in the body. So, for example, speaking, the brain sends electrochemical messages, and that the responsive triggers are words coming out of the mouth. So now we'll look over to the endocrine system. The endocrine system, rather than using electrochemical messages, it uses chemical messengers, which are also called hormones. So the whole point of the endocrine system is that it sends hormones throughout the body. These hormones travel over long distances, so all hormones travel through the blood to attach to the target cell. Whereas in the nervous system, the nerve cells are very close to other neurons or other nerve cells, which is how the signals are transmitted. However, hormones travel through the blood. So a hormone is often released from glands, often up like on other parts of the body. They transfer through the blood to reach a target cell where they then bind to receptors. Like neurotransmitters, hormones are proteins with a specific shape, and because they have a specific shape, that shape of the hormone must fit with the shape of the receptor protein. So the shape is again extremely important. For all proteins, you want to make sure you remember that their shape determines their function. So those are the nervous and endocrine systems. The next thing we'll look at are feedback loops. And feedback loops are responses that occurs when something changes in the body and then it's a system to either regulate a change or return to homeostasis. So the first one we're looking at are negative feedback loops, and negative feedback loops aim to maintain homeostasis. So how these work is that there's a change, and that change prompts a change in the opposite direction. So think of it as sort of a fluctuating pattern. When one thing increases, it causes a different thing. It causes a different thing to either decrease, which then causes the other thing to decrease, which causes the other thing to increase. They're working in opposites to help maintain a stable internal environment. So there are two examples you want to know for negative feedback loops. The first is about regulating temperature. So with temperature, if your body rises too high, you begin to sweat, which will then help you lower temperature. So your temperature gets too high, you sweat, then your body temperature can goes lower. If it goes too low, then there are other responses to get it back up. So that's the first one for regulating temperature. And then the second one you want to know is with regulating blood glucose, which comes up a lot. So when regulating your blood sugar levels, if glucose gets too high, insulin is released. And insulin, this is why diabetic people often have insulin shots or insulin patches to make sure that their blood sugar levels don't get too high. So insulin is released, which lowers the blood sugar. And then if blood glucose levels get too low, which often occurs if too much insulin is released, then this thing called glucagon is released. And then glucagon helps to raise your blood sugar level back. So these two work in flux and often result in blood sugar levels going higher, then lower, then higher, then lower, until to help try and maintain homeostasis. So the second type of feedback loop are positive feedback loops. And positive feedback loops are a cycle where change is amplified, and it happens in the same direction. So instead of negative feedback loops where after one thing increases, something else decreases, in a positive feedback loop, one thing increases, which causes another thing to increase, which increases the original thing, and things keep amplifying until something occurs. So the one key example which could come up is with childbirth. So once you start getting contractions, hormones are released to cause contractions, that releases more hormones, which cause more contractions, which release more hormones and more contractions, and these hormones and contractions continue going until the baby is born. So contractions occur, which lead to hormones, which such as progesterone and estrogen are the two that occur during the reproductive cycle. And then these hormones cause more contractions, and then the cycle continues until eventually the baby is born, and then the cycle stops because there's no longer a need for contractions to push out the baby because the baby's already been delivered. Okay, so then the next system we're going to look at is the immune system. So the immune system responds to various things. Its role, which I'll just write here next to the immune system, is to fight foreign invaders. So the immune system is really there to protect your body from any diseases, viruses, anything else. It's your body's protection against invasion. So a pathogen, which is one thing you need to know, is any disease-causing microbe. So this can be a bacteria, a virus, anything that invades your body system that can cause a form of damage. So your pathogen is what is being fought. And now, this is a key thing. Antigens that are often confused with antibodies, you want to have these two very, very distinct in your mind. Antigens are on the surface of pathogens. So antigens are on the surface of pathogens that cause an immune response. So the antigens come into your body attached to the pathogens, and they're for example, little spiky things on the surface of pathogens. So your immune response sees these antigens, and then that triggers a response. So the immune response, which is the next thing you want to know, is where antibodies come in. Antibodies are different from antigens and are part of your body. So one of the main structures in the immune system are white blood cells, which produce antibodies. Antibodies are specific to certain antigens. So once they're produced by white blood cells, they're produced by our body to help fight the invaders. They bind to antigens, and once they bind to these antigens, they are tagged for destruction, which can then be stopped. So antibodies, which you can help remember because they have the word body in them, are produced by our body with the goal of binding to antigens and then destroying them for destruction. So I'll just say this one more time because it's very important. You don't want to mess this up on the regions. Antigens are on the surface of pathogens that cause a response, and antibodies are produced by white blood cells in our bodies to bind to antigens and tag them for destruction. This is also one thing. The other thing you want to remember is that because antibodies are also proteins, they have specific shapes that are specific to the antigen. So you won't just have one antibody that binds to every disease. You have specific antibodies to that antigen. And the final thing you want to know is that, I'm not going to just write this down, but you just want to know that it's important that organ donors are a match. If they're not a match, then all things have certain antigens on them, even the organs or other things in our body. If organ donors are not a match and you put in an organ with certain antigens that your body recognizes as foreign, then that causes rejection as the immune system recognizes the organ as an invader and starts attacking it. Which is why it's really important that doctors find a match for blood matches, any organ donors. It's extremely important to make sure that there's no immunorejection. So the next thing we're going to look at with the immune system are vaccinations and immunity. So vaccines contain a weak or deadened virus. And the reason they do this is to stimulate an immune response. So how vaccinations work is that because the virus is dead or weakened, it can't harm you, so it won't actually cause you to be sick or have any very negative consequences, but the immune system will produce antibodies specific to the virus, as if it was harmful. because the immune system doesn't distinguish. It sees a foreign invader with antigens and it says, oh no, I'm in danger, it's time to produce antibodies. So it will then produce these antibodies that are specific to the virus. And once it produces these antibodies, this is a very important thing to remember, that memory cells are produced. So these memory cells, once the antibodies are created, memory cells remember that these antibodies were created and remember this virus. So if the person ever gets the virus in the future, the memory cells will activate, quickly triggering the response to create more antibodies and helping to fight off the virus quickly before it gets too bad. So memory cells are very key, and vaccinations help you build immunity by generating memory cells. The next thing is very quick, but it's looking at what allergies are. So allergies are, which lots of people have, especially to common things like pollen, is an overreaction of the immune system to an often harmless subject, which is called an allergen. So we'll use the example of pollen. While pollen isn't actually likely going to cause any serious damage to any parts of your body, if you breathe in pollen, the immune system views it as a harmful substance, and that causes a large reaction, which is why you get things like prickly throat, stuffy nose, itchy eyes, because it's trying to fight off that what it considers to be a pathogen, which is actually harmless. So this harmless substance you want to remember is called an allergen, and an allergy is when you are allergic to that allergen and your body produces specific responses, which has all the regular symptoms of allergies. Okay, and now the final thing you want to know with the immune system is HIV, also called the human immunodeficiency virus. So this is an STD, so it's only sexually transmitted. And what you want to know is that this virus wipes out the immune system. So HIV is particularly nasty because it functions by basically destroying all of your white blood cells. So people with HIV are then keep losing their white blood cells, and this then causes, as everyone knows, it leads to AIDS. And AIDS is the last stage of an HIV infection when the body's immune system is so badly damaged because of the virus that it's open to infection by other viruses and you can't fight it back. So the real harm about this is that you can't fight pathogens. So when you have HIV and eventually AIDS, your immune system is so weak that anything like a regular cold that you would often easily fight off in a day or two can be life-threatening because you just don't have the antibodies or the white blood cells to produce antibodies to help you fight off that disease, which often causes death. And there is currently no cure for HIV. Okay, so that's all the content, and now we just have some practice questions. So first we have, the review questions is written down here. So first we have number 13. Doctors often use certain medications to treat infections. A few people have a reaction to some of these medications, such as itching, swelling, or trouble breathing. This is an example of, so first we have using antibodies to cure a medical problem. So this one is not the answer because harmlessly reacting to certain medications is not curing a medical problem. Especially, it's just a form of overreacting, which might have given away the answer. The second one is the body's immune system overreacting to a usually harmless substance. This would likely be our answer because the immune system is overreacting and causing a negative reaction like itching, swelling, or trouble breathing to a substance that is likely harmless if a doctor is using the certain medication to help treat an infection. So this is our answer, but to be safe, we'll look through the other ones. The third is the body creating a mutation to fight unknown pathogens. The body does not create a mutation in DNA. You can't just say, I want to mutate my DNA and then do it. Mutations occur randomly, so this would not be the correct answer. And then the final one is a vaccine causing the body to produce antigens against the infection. So this is not our answer because it's not a vaccine that's being created to help treat a disease with weakened forms of like a dead pathogen. It's a specific medication to treat an infection that is already in the body. So this is not a vaccine helping produce antigens against the infection. Also, the largest issue with this question is that it says the body is producing antigens. This is the one thing that I think I repeated like 4 times earlier. The body does not produce antigens, it produces antibodies. Antigens are found on the pathogen. So this one is like doubly wrong. If anyone circled that, I'd be very unhappy. Next is number 10. We have anhidrosis is the inability to sweat normally. If the human body cannot sweat properly, it cannot cool itself, which is potentially harmful. Anhidrosis most directly interferes with a feedback mechanism that maintains homeostasis, which would be our answer because if we remember, sweating and regulating temperature is an example of one of the negative feedback loops in the human body, which helps us to keep a stable temperature and maintain homeostasis. But we'll just look through the rest of the answers. The second one is an immune system response to harmless antigens. This would not be our answer because sweating is not an immune response. Antibodies triggered by white blood cells. Next, we have the synthesis of hormones in the circulatory system. Not only does the circulatory system not synthesize hormones, but hormones are not what is occurring with sweat. So this would not be your answer. And then finally, you have the enzymatic breakdown of water in cells. Enzymes would likely not be breaking down water into just hydrogen and oxygen in the cells, but independently, sweating is not breaking down water, it's releasing water with other things to help cool down the body. So there are no enzymes here breaking down water. So the best answer would be number 1. And then our last question is number 30. The role of antibodies in the human body is to 1. Stimulate pathogen reproduction to produce additional white blood cells. So this one would definitely not be our answer because pathogens are the invaders that are being fought by antibodies. So you wouldn't want to produce more pathogen. When you want to stimulate it, you'd want to stop pathogen reproduction. So the second one is to increase the production of guard cells to prevent against pathogens. So this one would not be the answer. Antibodies don't produce guard cells. That's not part of the immune system, and that's not what's used to fight pathogens. So some people might be tripped up by this just because you're trying to guard yourself against foreign invaders. It just sounds like it'd be right, but that's not accurate, and it's not what occurs with antibodies. Number 3 is to promote the production of antigens to stimulate an immune response. Again, please do not mess this up. Antigens are on pathogens, not produced by the body. So antibodies would not produce antigens, which means that number 3 is not our answer. And that leaves us with number 4, which is to recognize foreign antigens and mark them for destruction. This one would be our best answer because they recognize the foreign antigens which are found on pathogens, and then they mark them for destruction by other cells. So antibodies bind to these antigens, recognizing them, and then causing their later destruction. So 4 would be our best answer here. That's all for the video. Thank you for watching.